Chess Labyrinth is a fantasy action puzzle game inspired by the classic game of chess.
Imagine if you're dropped into the land of Kusari. Sinu and Moru, two warring kingdoms, have been fighting over this land for over a millennium to no avail. Now they need to come up with a new strategy. That's where you come in. As a member of one of these kingdoms, you will be given the high-profile task of assassinating the king of the opposing kingdom. This will not be a task for the faint of heart, though. For one, the kingdom is composed of a labyrinth-like format that you must use your wits and determination to navigate. Furthermore, there will be dangerous enemies that are prepared to fight you to the death. However, do not be disheartened, young warrior. Using the gold you collect throughout your journey, you can upgrade your armor and weapons and become a legend throughout Kusari. One such way to acquire gold would be to solve puzzles, rigorous tests of the mind that will surely assess not only your intellect, but also your power of will. Gold will also be dropped from your slain enemies and can be found throughout the kingdom's twists and turns. Try moving through the maze quickly by dodging and avoiding enemies, or be resourceful and stop to solve puzzles for gold. Your strategy for tackling this journey is up to you. Are you ready to begin your mission as a top-secret agent of the king?
As a new player, you'll be presented with several options for beginning a gameplay session. These options include a tutorial, a simple but fun level for teaching players the base mechanics of a game. There's also a single-player session, a much longer and challenging journey throughout the land of Kusari. This level will include 2 unique zones depending on which kingdom you're aligned with. It will also contain randomly spawned maze walls, puzzles, and towns to trade with merchants. Finally, there are multiplayer options to host or join a lobby. The multiplayer version of the game will take place on the same maze as the single-player game. However, it will be more challenging in the sense that you'll be racing against another player to kill the opposing player's king before they kill yours.
Originally, we intended for our game to have a much more in-depth RPG style, with a variety of weapon choices, enemies, and player characters. The player would be able to buy items from a town blacksmith and upgrade their gear as they went along the maze to become stronger alongside the enemies as they go deeper into the maze. Aside from stats, character classes were planned for the game, which would provide different playstyles and abilities. For example, player knights would have no problem dispatching enemy pawns, but player pawns would have superior stealth kills that allowed them to avoid lengthy combat altogether. We wanted the game to be mostly centered around the procedurally generated maze, adding replayability and constantly giving the player new areas to explore. We intended for there to be some sort of way for players to use stealth mechanics. Players that did high-profile actions such as killing enemies indiscreetly would result in the player's identity being discovered sooner, alerting the opposing team's security, and causing the player to be unable to sneak past enemies or trade with merchants. Over time, we realized that many of these ideas would be put out of scope, considering the time frame. During this process, we refined the scope of our design to exclude unnecessary elements of the game. We limited ourselves to 3 NPC types, a merchant, doctor, and an enemy knight. Similarly, the player is only able to play as a knight. We also limited the player and enemy knights to use only a sword. This weapon can still be upgraded by merchants throughout the game, improving its stats and the overall capability of the player. We shifted some of the focus from the maze to minigame puzzles. We realized that the maze might become monotonous on its own, so we included a fun and rewarding way to allow the player to cut through the maze and earn extra gold while adding gameplay variation. Given enough time, we would have been able to implement all these fun ideas and polish them out even more. However, our game has a number of mechanics which feed into each other and provide the player an engaging experience. And now a lot of that legwork is done to implement the full game in the future.
Now as for challenges, our original design consisted of much more ambitious goals around the board. It revolved around RPG progression mechanics and a class system involving different stats and abilities that the characters could use to help traverse the maze. As we made our way through the semester, we saw how large our initial vision was. As such, we had to make multiple compromises on features while also maintaining a balance that would give the player a satisfactory experience. We also experienced multiple interruptions in our overall workflow due to our inexperience using Git extensively in Unity. We would encounter merge conflicts due to our team size, and Unity scenes having their binaries changed upon editing. Our lack of experience in Unity also led us down a few pitfalls in poor development practices, which added to our work overhead and lost us progress a couple of times. We also faced some performance issues as the scale of the game increased and we were using more and more complex textures and terrain for aesthetic purposes. This had the negative consequence of making playtesting and sometimes compiling scripts and making it build less efficient. Lastly, when making our final configurations of the game and starting the addition of controller support, we realized that some aspects of the game relied heavily upon the mouse and keyboard setup, which resulted in us redesigning overall controls integration and our system late in development.